Welcome back to the Story Lens podcast, where your story is our focus. Thanks for joining us today. We have a young and talented attorney, Taylor Smith. She is from the firm Goodspeed Merrill in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and has spent the last couple of years working with family offices and ultra-high net worth families. And she's a wealth of resource. We dig into her story. We learn about why she does what she does and some of the complexity and kind of red flags she sees in the family office space. So glad you're here. Appreciate you joining us. And without further ado, we'll jump right in.
Welcome to the Story Lens podcast, where your story is our focus. We explore wealth, legacy, and purpose through a process that starts with deep listening and leads to one-of-a-kind strategies. At StoryOne, we believe the best planning begins with you.
Yeah, welcome to the Story Lens podcast. We're here today with Taylor Smith, just up from Tulsa. Unfortunately, just got a ticket on our way up, so that's a tough start. But
paying my dues.
Yeah, really glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, so just kind of starting with going back to law school, and you had mentioned in a little earlier conversation you were thinking about sports law, like how did you end up in this family office space? What led you down this path?
Yeah, that's a great question. And full transparency, 5 years ago I didn't even know that this industry existed. I couldn't have even, I wouldn't have recognized the phrase or term family office if I'd heard it on TV or in a commercial or anything like that. I would never have clocked that. So growing up in a rural community where, it's a lot of blue collar workers, my parents owned a small business, my mom was a teacher, salt of the earth type of folks. There wasn't a lot of financial sophistication being discussed ever, right? And I know we were surrounded by, and in our family even, with successful business owners who were working, but it's not like they were discussing what we now see with our clients, which is a different level of asset complexity and investment opportunity and all those things that start becoming part of a conversation when you move into that kind of industry. So growing up, I was really in more of this, middle America ecosystem of people raising kids and building a life. And it wasn't until I left for school that I even was exposed really to anything else, right? Outside of that, four people for the longest part, family, until my youngest brother came on, where my parents are working and were at the school with me and all that stuff. So when I got to college, and that had always been an assumption to me, because my parents did everything they could to, have us be successful in every opportunity, and education was important. Like, I always knew that I'd go to college. It wasn't a matter of if, really. But I didn't have I had no pinpoint for exactly, I just knew I was going to get there, right? And then I was going to do something when I got there. And law school was similar, because I knew when I was done with college, and I majored in political science, and just like any other liberal arts degree, what do you do with that? And I loved it. I loved that area of study, and I think that was right for me. I knew I was never going to be number cruncher, finance, accounting major. Like, that was just not, I was not drawn to that. It's funny now that I have found my way back into that through a different pipeline. But when I left college, I knew that I was going to go to law school, and I'd taken the LSAT, and I wound up working for a couple of years and finally did all my applications and got in at Oklahoma. And it's a long story how I got there, but my very best friend had bought a house there. Her family's there. So I had a landing place, and 10 years after, undergrad, I'm back being her roommate. And I had this vision in my mind that I was going to get into law school, be the best in every class, because that's just how I've thought of everything. Everything is possible to me, and sometimes to the level of delusion. But you learn very quickly, when you enter a program like that, your classmates are the brightest and the best from where they came from, and so that was a little difficult when I got there, because
it's hard for everybody to be the first in the class.
Right. Somebody has to be too, or last,
Somebody has to be in the middle of the bell curve.
That's right. So when I got there and I had no idea what law school was about, I just thought, people say this is hard, and it's a esteemed thing to do, and it's challenging, so I'm going to go do that thing. And when I got there and I took contracts, and remember, I thought this was like, I'm going to go be this fancy dancy contract attorney working for some sports team. I'm like a week into contracts. I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. There's no chance I could ever do this. You know, how am I going to be able to talk to people? Because it was very quickly I realized, you know, there's courtroom attorneys who are in relationship with people, sometimes not great relationship, right? A little adversarial. And then there's transactional attorneys who, you know, predominantly are at the desk. They don't really want to engage with people. I mean, that's a generalization, and I thought, oh my gosh, well, neither of those work for me. So law school really didn't provide a great pipeline. I think that's probably across the board, not an OU thing, no knocking to OU, but, you know, people enter law school and they say, I'm going to go be a prosecutor, or I'm going to be a defense attorney, or I'm going to, you know, be working on legislative policy and all those things. And none of that was exciting to me. And the one thing that I thought I was going to like very quickly was not. So in my first semester, I recall calling my mother and just crying to her. Like, I've made a huge mistake. I've committed to this. I've taken out these student loans. You know, I'm a grown up now. I've graduated from college, and now these are my opportune years where I could be working and, you know, starting a career. And here I am in this school, not even liking it, in a different state. I mean, it was just so crazy. And you know, my dad very much raised us to, if you start a job, you finish the job. And so it was a little bit of like, well, I just got to keep limping along here and figure out, I'll figure it out. And so again, it was like, well, I'm in this space, so I guess I'll make that work for me somehow. So that turned into coming out of law school and becoming a planner. So estate planning was the first thing that I did right out of school. And I had started seeking that out in my third year, kind of by accident, taking the course because it was tested on the bar exam, not because I thought that I was going to love it or something. But then in the first week of that class, I thought, I think this might be the thing that I could do. Because
was that
it's
just,
relational.
was it working with families side by side, the relational aspect, the planning for the future? Yeah.
So it was less about textbook case recognition and application, all that. And it's more of like, at the end of the day, there's a legal document, but the 99% before that is this. It's this exploration and understanding. And I've always been drawn to that. I love to talk to people and understand their family story. I started working with older people first, you know, the retired and up demographic. I loved that. Even as a kid, I remember I would invite old people who were eating alone at a restaurant to come sit at the table with my family. I just thought they were so interesting, like they're this uncracked book, if anybody would just ask. So I was always interested in the story component. And then that was such a crossover into planning, because everything anybody does around planning is built off of the story. You know, there's so much history there that if you want to do a good job in service of that person, you really need to be fully intertwined with everything that they've been through to understand the person who's sitting across from you.
We did not ask Taylor to say that, by the way. I mean, that is clearly how we're oriented at StoryOne. But that was not a paid pitch.
It wasn't a paid pitch.
It just seems, it's just true, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
It's true.
And I think people who are interested in that flock to this area of work because, you know, I feel very lucky to be in a job and a career that I really enjoy. And I know a lot of people don't get to say that.
That's true.
You know, and we spend a lot of time working in our lives. So it's incredible to be in a position where I'm spending a lot of time doing something that I very authentically have always been drawn to, you know. So planning was exactly where I needed to be. And as a very green attorney who didn't know that much about estate planning, I was very good because I could connect with people. And so it was more of I always knew I could learn more legal technical. I mean, you always can.
Sure.
And I enjoy school. I mean, that has always been the case. I'm a researcher. I like to explore and learn new things. So, you know, I could connect with people. I'm always looking for a way to connect with anybody.
Yeah.
And that's probably annoying to my husband or whoever is with me at the grocery store, because I'll just talk to anybody.
Wait till your daughters are teenagers. My
You
teenage
too.
daughters love going anywhere with me because they always just make fun of how many friends is Dad going to make today.
And my dad's the exact same way.
I think it's a
Like,
small
could
town thing.
never
It's
meet
just
a
like,
stranger.
yeah.
Like, I will talk to anybody, and it's probably frustrating some people, but it is a cultural thing. I mean, but it's also disarming. I mean, I try to be intentional whenever I'm introduced to a new family or client or things. I really want to get to the informal piece quickly, because I think everything before that is so surface level, like we're not really moving the needle on anything. But you have to be able to meet the vulnerability to get it.
Yeah.
So I really try and get there pretty quick. Like, people think attorneys are a certain way a lot of the time, whether that's because just socially they're recognized as this different thing.
What's your joke, John? You like 99% of attorneys give 1% the bad name?
That's right. That's right.
So sometimes you're like paying for something that you didn't,
Right.
a check you didn't write. But I try and get to that. That has always been my positioning with people, is like, let's connect so I hear what you think you're telling me.
Yeah. So is that what, do you feel like, you were good, right? It's just because of that relational connection, because you care about the story, because that drives you, led you to be a good estate planning attorney. Is that what catapulted you into this kind of, again, this niche term, this family office or ultra high net worth families that just have, layers of complexity? How did you bridge that gap?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to stay in planning, period. Love estate planning. And family office is what I like to call estate planning plus. It's that plus more. So after about 5 years of practice, and at the time, my now husband and I had gotten married. After the birth of our first daughter, she turned 1 year old. We moved from Oklahoma City, which is where we were living at the time, and moved to Tulsa, which is where we are now. And so it was about 5 years in that I'd been doing this very similar practice across the two firms that I was with, which was relatively high volume, low complexity, foundational estate planning, which is still very important. So, zero criticism to that at all. But in many of those estate planning firms, it's a certain business model where it's a certain demographic, it's a certain service, it's a certain process, and anything outside of that really is not, it doesn't work for the team, right?
Yeah, you basically need 50 new clients a year.
Yeah, scale.
Right.
It becomes
it
transactional.
needs to be moving pretty quick.
Keep
And
cranking them through. Yeah.
I did a lot of seminars, and I traveled, and I met a lot of people, and so I took a lot of at-bats, which was great as a young attorney, and learned more and more throughout that about, legal technical skills. But I was really only seeing one pretty limited profile of a client that I was planning around. And it was a non-taxable, single or married, retired, maybe a limited investment portfolio, and some land, some mineral interests if it was getting real tricky. But, so I started getting a little bored, for lack of better phrasing. I just wasn't being challenged enough.
Yeah.
I liked being able to meet a lot of different people, but it was transactional.
And there's a redundancy to those plans.
Right. So it wasn't hard
Yeah.
anymore. I was like,
Right.
well, can I see something that's a little different and a little out there? But again, those models, they just really weren't built to, we weren't going to get some taxable estate walking through the door. It just wasn't, the communication and the reach out was not getting to those people. So as much as I wanted it, because about 3 years in, I said, I'd really like to do some, higher level planning. And it wasn't that wasn't allowed. It's just those people were not.
They're not walking through
in
the front
front of me,
door, right?
ever.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, if they had, my boss would have done that work, right? So I knew I was getting pretty bored and was losing steam. And so I thought, well, what's the next thing you do? If you want to stay in planning and you want to do something harder, you need to start working with taxable estates. So I started looking for a new position online, and, I have young kids and had some limitations and ideas for what the perfect job would be for me. And there it was. after I had gone through 3 months of looking for a job and I was exhausted, and I said, I'm going to take a break. And then the position I'm in now was posted on LinkedIn, and it was fully remote with a firm in Colorado. And my husband, ever the realist, is like, that's kind of a pipe dream. Like, let's be a little realist here, because of course I'm the everything is possible, and you know, so he's all, hey, you know, let's be real about this. Let's take it slow. You know, you don't have to. Anyway, here I am. The job has been more than I could have ever contemplated 2 years ago when I joined, knowing that I was going to be doing still estate planning, connecting with people in the same way that I have, with a very different set of circumstances behind them. So what hasn't changed are the conversations around family, dynamics, collaboration or not, communication or not. Those things have not changed. The asset classes have changed a lot. And, you know, I have learned and continue to learn every day something from my clients, from our advisors we work across from. You know, we have an interesting mix of clientele that we service within the family office group, and they come from a lot of different backgrounds, business owners, sophisticated investors, inheritors, you know, and it's all very fun. It is the perfect intersection between complexity from a tax and corporate structuring standpoint and estate planning. And family office really touches more than just those two categories. I'm really boiling it down, but it involves everything, and it's very up close. It's very personal, whether you're direct with a client or their advisor, because that has been a change where sometimes my clients have a team, and so I'm really communicating more with their CFO. Maybe I see them every quarter or things of that nature. So that part has been a little bit of an adjustment, but it is absolutely been a continuation of everything that I liked about planning, and then just a launch into space of, you know, how far can you go with all this stuff? You know, intraterritorial planning with Puerto Rico or international global mobility. I mean, it starts getting into the, well, what could we do? And that part is really fun. If
you want to be challenged, you're going to be, there's a lot of opportunities to be challenged.
Yes, it is not boring at all.
Well, speaking to that complexity that exists oftentimes at this level of wealth and multi-generational wealth, it's part of the thing we wanted to think through with you today is kind of when advisors are working with families where that complexity is kind of maybe starting to compound, right? And there's sometimes a lack of awareness, or they're working with a team that, you know, they were fine when that net worth was not a taxable estate, right? And if you're listening, that's under $30 million today if it's a married couple, right? So there's wealth going on, but it's less complex. And then all of a sudden this complexity starts to compound, and the current team may not be aware of how to manage that. But of course, like, they're not going to say like, hey, this is out of our league. And then you come in and show up on the scene, right? And so, like, what are some of the things you've seen as you enter in this family office space where you say, whoa, like, there's been no quarterback.
A lot of that.
Things are a mess.
A lot of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, oftentimes I think the advisors are aware and perhaps don't want to reveal all the cards, because I can tell you, I can think of 5 clients off the top of my head. They are 100% the biggest fish in their advisor's pond. So of course, and this is a psychological, philosophical, being able to identify, am I with the right shop for whatever service I'm getting? Because many retail advisors, the job is bottom line volume, right? The dollar is the driver. And it can't be that way within the family office industry, because it's much more intimate. It's much more, there has to be something larger than that behind it. So sometimes the mismatch is right there, where I can't lose this client. If I tell them I'm over my skis, I lose this client. What ends up happening is you stay over your skis, you lose the client anyway, and then you lose the trust because you never actually cop to the I'm not ready. Or maybe, can I have time to get ready? You know, can I grow in this with you? I mean, and that's just the human. Nobody wants to say that,
Sure.
right? Especially when you're in this position of trust and reliance where clients say, you're the expert in the room and you need to tell me the exact right thing to do, right? And if we win, great.
Yeah.
If we lose.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, like, really, as I've kind of thought about it, there's basically kind of three primary, like, areas that we are talking about, right? You have your investment advisor, you have your CPA or tax, and then you've got your attorney. And that attorney, that's a broad brush, but a lot of times, it's
Sometimes you have one.
It's your estate planning.
Yeah.
But each one of those, so is each one of those people on your team situationally aware and the right person on the team, right? But then there's the reciprocal side of that, where, like, these three people may not realize that they are completely out of their depth. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is on the other side of the table. The client may not realize that everyone on the other side of the table is completely out of their depth, right? The interesting thing is this is like, it happens almost every family you meet with. They want one thing. We just want simple.
They all
Right?
want
They all want to
Simple as
They bring you a balance sheet this long and all these properties
Right.
and all these kids
Right.
and blended family, and they're like, just make it easy.
Yeah, just make it easy,
I don't
right?
need a long
yeah.
document.
But, so there's a little
Yeah.
bit of, like, lack of situational awareness or intentional blindness on the client's part. But then there are these three people that they may know and love, right? They may know their kids. They were they're in the same country club. They're in the same whatever. But it is just interesting that there's kind of two sides of that equation. It's like the service providers and the client. And so it is interesting just like how there could be, and there often is, the perfect storm where these three don't want to say, hey, I'm completely out of my depth. And the client really doesn't want to put in the work to go find new replacements. So we're going to use what I call the ostrich approach, right?
Yeah.
What's an ostrich do? They stick their head in the sand and they hope that whatever the scary thing is goes away, right? But what happens is, as wealth grows, as complexity grows, and you've got your head in the sand, whatever the scary thing is actually gets bigger.
Yeah, you can't really, I mean, the pursuit of simplicity is it's totally understandable, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yes, that would be great. But pretty much every time we show up on the scene, like, that was 5 miles ago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We have passed the exit.
And it's a new normal.
And it is.
It's
Yeah.
a constant adjusting. It's a constant being open to being flexible, because very quickly a family can go from $25 million and, we don't need to have a conversation about any extra fancy planning you are trying to talk to me about, to now it's 50 and I hear that there's trouble with that, and now we have a problem. So it is a timing component, and certainly for people like a CPA or an estate planning attorney. I mean, 5 years ago in a different house, I could not have provided the service that I do today because that wasn't part of the model. I wouldn't even have known where to start if one of my today clients had walked in the door. But it's a willingness to be able to recognize that, and also sandbox rules, right? Oftentimes my clients who come to us for tax strategy have estate planning attorneys. My job is not to say, I'm better than your estate planning attorney, and we're going to totally do everything that they've done, right? Collaborative. And so it's an identification of what's everybody's lane, and let's make sure that that's identified, because with multiple advisors on the same project, it can be hard. Who do I even go to for this information? Who is the bottleneck for something else? So always kind of making sure every participant understands where everybody sits, and then pull those resources together to be able to do the best plan. And it's a huge machine. if the CPA is not doing their job, or they're not aware of what's going on with the planner or the advisor, they're not going to be able to do their best job. And that is shared across the board. CPAs are a really tough one, especially when, my client's mind, well, we came to you and now our stuff is really complex. We got all these entities and all these different partnership agreements and what's a K1, like all these things. And, I always raise the issue early in the year. I mean, we're coming to tax season right now. I'm like, call your CPA now and tell them, this year we have a gift tax return. Ask them about this. You've never had a 709. Talk to your CPA. Are they comfortable with this? Some CPAs, just like any other practitioner, they say, here's my lane. This is where I really like to work. Outside of that is going to be frustrating for everyone, and maybe I don't want to do it. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of that CPA. It's just like maybe we patch on an additional, right, to support. So I think there's room there to not just say, oh, well, now I've crossed this invisible threshold and I got to get rid of the whole team and level up.
Right.
I think there's some, softer transition strategies.
The CPA thing's actually really interesting. Like I think there's a couple different thresholds that families cross. In particular, a lot of these families that we're talking about, the kind of the ultra high net worth, or people that have a lot of complexity, a lot of business owners, right? So that business owner, like, I have a family of mine I'm thinking of, love them dearly. They've had the same CPA for 20, 25 years. I mean, it's literally like a 9-digit revenue business, right? So that CPA that does the accounting for the business is super important, right? Super important. However, there's time where there's going to be divergent interests and taxes. What's good for the corporation may not be good for the family. What's good for the family may not be the best for the corporation. So all of a sudden you're getting these people that their net worth has grown tremendously. They have an accountant or CPA that's been doing their business work for as long as they've been in business, right? But now the family should really have their own CPA, right? And that family CPA is having different conversations and thinking about different things than the business CPA. But a lot of times that's a bridge that's too far. So it does just become this thing where it's like, well, we've got this tool and it's the wrong tool, but we're going to continue to use it, right? So it's just interesting, like, as you think about all three of those professions, again, legal, financial advising, CPAs, there are times where it's just like the family, whether they're single family office bound, multifamily office, or some type of hybrid, there does become a time where it's like, actually you do need a different team member, because the person that was doing your accounting for your business that's wildly successful, they do a great job at that, but they're not necessarily thinking about you and your family as an entity. So it's just interesting to think about in each one of those categories as we bump into this question of, like, how are we going to make decisions ultimately?
And all of those people have to not just communicate, but have some process and organization for how they do so consistently. Because I think one pain point, I suppose, where families are surprised is the amount of time and coordination involved, which, if we're doing our jobs correctly, the client doesn't have to be the pivot point for that. They don't
Actually,
have
we
to
hope
sit
they're
in
not.
the
We
middle.
hope
We would love to remove them if they would let us do so.
Yeah.
Get them out of the driver's seat and, provide the support around them. That getting to that point is a totally different conversation, but it's constant. It's all year long. It's not nobody is able to do their best plan if we're connecting in March before the CPAs are ready to file returns. I just had a conversation on an interesting case that we're engaged on, which is still a bit nebulous. We've done some complex planning, but like a very small slice. I was kind of triaging some rapidly appreciating private investment. So this is a $200+ million estate. Advisors in every, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. I'm talking the Goldman Sachs guys. And I'm like, what is the deal with this guy? Because we're so far past the point of needing to get our hands around it. And it was hilarious. They talked to him again about, do you want to explore having a different structure to try and consolidate this stuff? Because it's just all over the place. And he said something along the lines of, well, I'd like to see some of these investments exit and get real hairy, really, before I start doing the complex planning. And of course, immediately I'm like, that is the opposite of what we want to do, right? We want to beat that thing.
Yeah.
Get out ahead of it. But that's the mindset of people's. And then again, I walk away from that conversation thinking, if the family that owns the jet and has 200 plus million in an estate with real estate in Italy and a yacht they keep in the Bahamas and all this stuff, if that family doesn't think that they're complex enough to need some sort of planning, I mean, people are different, but you gotta get there with that person. You have to say, well, what is going to be the thing?
Yeah.
Like, in your mind, what is something that could occur that is so drastic that we're there and we need adjustment?
Yeah.
And everybody's threshold for that is very different.
It is one of the interesting things, and you kind of brought up the wirehouses being on the same team, right? And when I first got in the industry, like, there was kind of the broker-dealer versus the RIA, right? And so at both ends of wealth, there is a real possibility of conflicts of interest when it comes to investment management, right? So at the low end, I mean, that's where we're talking about annuities and people that are selling commission-based things that aren't maybe not being in the best interest of the client, very insurance-based, right? But at the other end of the spectrum, the very wealthy families, they have literally the best-in-class wirehouse investment advisors on the planet. And those portfolios a lot of times have a lot of products in them. They have lots of hidden fees, lots of layered fees, funds of funds. And so it's interesting to think about, like, on the spectrum, the people that are getting sold annuities and don't know that there's a bunch of hidden fees and things going on. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got the ultra high net worth families that are using, again, the best in class wirehouse money managers. And those portfolios are also full of hidden fees. The other interesting thing about that is you think, I have the best in class wirehouse. You named them. Bang, bang, bang. If I needed to do something, surely that team would tell me I needed to do it, right? I mean, from a planning standpoint. But are they really interested in that? Are they really wanting to help you make sure that, hey, we want to make sure that your taxable estate is minimized? Is that really in their best interest, or are they just providing the investment management? Meanwhile, the family thinks, I've got the best advisors on the planet. So it's just interesting to think about, what different people at the table are doing or not doing.
There's no doubt that if this work is done well, it's not efficient. And it's not all that scalable. It's like
very labor intensive.
It's labor intensive. It's intimate. Where you started, right? Thinking about the family story. Like, it is a much easier task, and it creates it requires a lot of intellect and capabilities. But to say, here's $100 million, I'm going to go invest it in these 7 things, right? And I'm going to report to you 4 times a year and tell you how well we're doing or how poorly we're doing. Versus, I'm going to sit down across the table from you and listen to your story for a couple of hours, and then I'm going to think about how we can plan that's going to have your heart for your kids involved. And actually, I'm going to go talk to your kids, and we're going to have a family meeting. Like, that is so much stickier and messier.
That's really messy.
And it's like,
that's where the work is.
That's where the work is, right? And so, yeah, you're like, well, hey, you do have some really sophisticated money managers, but there's no real planning happening.
You have to have support who are willing to be inconvenienced, who are willing to take the time out of their day to bring you to someone else where there's not a dollar involved.
Right.
Where I say, it looks like you need help with risk management.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we need to go talk to somebody about hostage insurance. Out of my wheelhouse, I don't want to be the professional in that. I'm not making anything off of that. It's still a win. For the client, it's a win for me and our relationship when you can be that connector and that person. And I think that is the key in the family office industry. It's not necessarily having the best, the brightest, the greatest, the biggest names in-house with you or part of your ecosystem. It's the network, honestly. Being 2 degrees of separation away from any solution is priceless. And it's trust. It's not you can't have somebody in your house with you who all they're looking out for is what's going in their pocket. It just cannot work. It will not work. Yep. Because this is so different from a business. It is a business. It's the business of the family, though.
Right.
And so it is a different animal completely. And so that is a huge misunderstanding both within the family and with service providers who aren't inside the work all the time, where they think, well, this is just an operating business, right? This is just the family investment company. And families think, well, this is just all our family assets. Like, this is the family's business. When it's really both of those at a very high level that involves a ton of communication and exploration. You have to begin with the end in mind with some of this stuff, and that can change, right? But families have to be able to identify, like, why do we even want to do this?
Yeah, it becomes, it's not about the ROI. Like, those things are important, but like the heart of most of the families we work with are like, what is this going to do to my kids? What is this going to do to my relationships with the people I love? How do I wrap my head around the fact that this is 10 generations of wealth? And that's a difficult thing to conceive, but like, how do I build a governance structure and that's where you're like, well, I know you want to keep it simple, but like, if we were running a $100 million business, I don't think the CEO would be like, I just want to keep it simple. Yeah, they know you want to run an effective business. So it's very true.
So one of the thoughts, just to kind of land the plane. So from a standpoint of the family's perspective, if there's people that are listening and they think, hey, I'm actually not receiving the support I need, right? And it's one of those 3 categories. What would your advice be from a standpoint of where would one even begin to think, I really need to explore, like, how do I find the right solutions for my family? So like when somebody comes in, meets with you guys the first time and you realize, hey, we actually have gaps in planning across the waterfront, where would you recommend that they start? How do you start that?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, my clients love to research, so research is good. I would say first step is go to your advisor and raise the question. If you're feeling uncomfortable, don't sit in that and not give them the chance to be in discussion with you about that. Maybe given the opportunity, they say, understood, and maybe there's another solution. Or, within this industry, the network is huge. So I would say raise the question before you just go inside yourself and say, okay, well, I've decided that doesn't work, and so I'm going to go otherwise. Most of my best referral sources are my clients. So if a family is similarly situated to another, and this is where groups like Tiger 21 and all of that become pretty impactful because they're experiencing similar events. And so they'll say, hey, we've got this issue going on in our family. Has anybody dealt with this? Yeah. Asking within that circle, yes, you're a phone call away from getting access to another opinion, and it's just like anything else. It's choosing your primary care physician or your dentist or whoever. It is a bit of a personality fit. And so looking, strategically around who in my community might be a resource for connecting me. The advisor conversation, though, is difficult because it's different demographics. And when I was doing foundational planning, the advisors I was around were servicing the same clients that I was then. And it's so different now, Even if I have great relationships with those people, this family is different than the service model within that group. And that's not wrong. I think there's a whole middle America that is missed, where people don't realize that they've crossed into this need of I need to talk to somebody about this, whether it's a net worth sort of thing or a business thing. Small business owners are hard workers, and so they're nose to the grindstone for a really long time. And I think they're so busy being in their business, they fail to work on their business until they're ready to leave. And then, from a planning perspective, it's like, well, we never got to talk about QSBS conversions. We never got to talk about legacy planning. We never got to talk about all these different things because that person is so siloed and thinking, I don't meet that, that they're not talking to me. I'm so busy doing this. So it's hard to find good help, certainly. But don't be afraid to ask for another opinion. I mean, we take intro, and I'm sure you all do too, introductory conversations with no expectation. It has to be it's a bit of a dating experience.
Oh, it's got to be a fit on both sides.
We got to be willing to, I don't need 1,000 clients. If I had 10 really great clients who are aligned with me on the way that we do our work and we could provide the most value to them, that's a perfect scenario, right? It's not a volume, it's not for everybody, and that's not an elitist thing. It's we're most helpful in X, Y, and Z, right? And that aligns with some kind of hairy, getting out there, crazy family structures.
Yep.
That's a hard question, though.
Yeah.
Where do you get help? And then how do you even know that the help that you have is taking care of business?
I mean, that's basically what you just described is kind of our thesis. Like, we think there's this whole swath of people that, got that net worth of $20 million to $400 million, $20 million to $250 million that are wildly underserved, and they need a lot, right? And it's interesting, like, quite frankly, the business owner that's worth $5 million needs almost the same planning as the business owner that's worth $20 million, right?
And when they sell their business, wouldn't you want that person to keep more of their money
right.
through having some
that's
legal structuring as necessary in advance if that's their retirement, right? So people think, well, my number's smaller, and so why do I need estate planning? We only have a farm with 200 acres and an old Ford pickup truck. I'm like, yes, you need planning. It's not a numbers game. And it's not a numbers game within family office threshold either. It's a matter of need and desire, really. It's not, we've hit this in the account and all of a sudden we got to launch all the planning. There's nothing like that.
Well, and you also will not get a postcard, right? Business owner's not going to get a postcard from the ether out there that says, hey, by the way, you have a lot of complex problems.
Look alive. Right. Call your local attorney,
Yeah. So, Taylor, from a standpoint of if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I think we'll include some contact stuff.
Yeah, there'll be some stuff in the liner notes.
In the liner notes, but feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I talk to lots of people in a lot of different places on LinkedIn. Connect by email, phone to my office line. You could send me a postcard if you wanted to. But.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate you joining this conversation. And yeah, good to be with you.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on the StoryLens podcast. If you're navigating complex financial decisions, we're here to help. We know your story is anything but ordinary, and that's why we start there, because the right solutions are as unique as you are.
StoryOne Family Office, LLC, or StoryOne is a registered investment advisor, RIA, registered with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Registration as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and the content of this communication has not been approved or verified by the United States Securities and Exchange Commission or by any state securities authority. StoryOne renders individualized investment advice to persons in a particular state only after complying with the state's regulatory requirements or pursuant to an applicable state exemption or exclusion. All investments carry risk, and no investment strategy can guarantee a profit or protect from loss of capital. Past performance is not indicative of future results. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor shall this be construed as advice for the financial needs of any individual. StoryOne is not permitted to offer, and no statements made during this podcast should constitute legal or tax advice. The information contained herein has been compiled by independent third parties, have been obtained from sources who are believed to be reliable. However, accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by StoryOne.